Have you ever wondered why you feel like something's wrong with you, like you don't belong, like you're different to everyone else, and that you're never really heard? Nobody really hears you. If you weren't truly listened to or seen as a child, then often those signs follow you into adulthood, and most of the time in ways you don't even realise. And in this video, I'm going to share with you 6 clear signs that you weren't listened to as a child. So think back to when you tried to express yourself, your needs, your emotions as a kid. Were you ignored? Were you shut down or even made fun of, made to feel this big? Do you still feel like you're having invisible conversations, like nobody's really listening to you as an adult? And do you feel guilt around having needs and communicating the way that you feel? And if you're nodding along to any of those, then trust me when I say you're not broken. These are trauma responses, not character flaws. And just before we get into the list, I think it's really important and key to mention where this stuff comes from. So as children, of course, it's really important we know to have, for our survival, to have shelter, to have food and to have water. And that seems to be standard. But what nobody talks about is how critical it is to have connection, to have safety, to be attuned to be truly seen for who we are, to have our needs, our feelings, our emotions supported and seen. Because with food, water and shelter, yes, we'll survive. But with the other things that I mentioned, when we're attuned to, when we're truly seen and understood as children, then that sets us up not only to survive as adults, but to thrive as adults, to feel comfortable with who we are in our own skin and to show up in the world as us. So the first thing on the list, number 1, is people pleasing or fawning. When we're not truly heard or even seen as children, when our emotions aren't validated or met with safety, then we have to develop coping mechanisms, adaptive strategies in order to survive. Now, these are brilliant mechanisms, but they don't serve us in adult life. They become maladaptive. And we find ways to please our parents. We find incredible, ingenious ways to make sure that they're happy, that they approve, that we get their love, that we get the connection that we need. But it's inauthentic because it's not true to ourselves, but it does ensure our survival. So if you fast forward in adult life, that still continues. So we go through our world, our lives, we relate to our world thinking that we still have to please everyone. We have to make sure that they're all okay. We put their needs before our own. But it's really inauthentic, and so often than not, people can see it because we're just always pleasing. We're always giving, give. It's draining, it's tiring. And if you are a people pleaser, then it's a surefire sign that you weren't heard as a child. That's why you developed that adaptive strategy. And I knew it only too well, especially in my job, because I would always say yes. Oh, John, we just need you to do this. Oh, John, can you do that? And I found it really, really difficult to say no. Yes, of course I'll do that. And just pile on more and more work. And if we move into number 2, it's our expression of anger. Now, anger is an interesting thing because we deem it to not be a healthy emotion. We're told that we shouldn't display our anger. But there are 2 types of anger. There is shutdown, where we just don't display our anger. You may say it yourself, I never get angry. Or the other people who are in constant rage, they're angry at everything. And both of those are a surefire sign that you weren't heard, you weren't listened to as a child. Because our healthy anger, our healthy aggression is very much linked to the terrible twos. When we go through that phase in our childhood where we are testing the boundaries, we're seeing what's safe for us, we want to be able to say no. And healthy aggression is all about our healthy protest. It's our ability to say no. As adults, to check with what's being asked of us and say, yes, I'm okay with that, or no, I'm sorry, that's not okay for me, please go away. And if we don't have the ability to get in touch with that anger, to get in touch with that emotion, if we're shut down from it because it wasn't safe, it wasn't allowed as children, we were always put on the naughty step when we acted out, then we are completely disconnected from it. So we don't have healthy boundaries. We're not able to put that up and say, actually, this isn't okay for me, I'm sorry, but thank you. And you can see how dangerous that is. It can lead to burnout. Like people pleasing, we always say yes to everything because we physically can't show up to the world and say, yes, I'm okay with that, or no, I can't do that, sorry. So on to number 3, and this is where we get overwhelmed in social situations. Now, when our needs aren't met, when we're not heard as children, we often end up with a nervous system that's stuck in hyperarousal. So you can imagine that you're in a car and your foot is pressed down hard on the accelerator or the gas and the brake at the same time. We're revved up, we're like this. So our senses are just heightened. We're constantly on the lookout for danger because, again, as I said at the start of this video, we need safety as children. We need to know where we stand. We need to know that we can be heard. We need to know that when things are too much for us or not enough for us, we can reach out and ask for it and get those needs and have those needs be met. But when they're not, our nervous system is often stuck in fight or flight, or if you're like me, I was always stuck in freeze and shutdown. So a social situation is just overwhelming. All of our adaptive mechanisms go into overdrive. Our people pleasing, our saying yes to everything. We're not looking after our own needs. We don't feel validated. We don't feel like we can ask for what we want. So it's just like a stimulation overdrive. It's too much for us, and especially if, like me, you're introverted, because you're constantly checking in with yourself, seeing, should I say that? Is it okay to say that? We show up in the world, it becomes quite performative. We didn't develop the skills from an early age, so we kind of had to develop them ourselves, kind of write our own rule book, and that's great in some ways, but in social situations it becomes really difficult because it's almost like paint by numbers. I need to do this in this situation. I need to say this when I speak to them. I need to look at them. I need to hold eye contact for 2 or 3 seconds and then look away. And you start to see just how broken our view is of ourselves and of the world, the way that we relate to the world around us. And that brings me painfully to number 4, and that's when we feel like we always feel like we're an outsider or an imposter in our own lives. And my teacher, Guy Polini, refers to this as the outsider beautifully, and I think it really paints a picture of the kind of adult or even the child on the outside. If we look at the social gatherings that I mentioned in number 3, we almost, even though we're surrounded by people, we're outside somehow. And this relates to, in NARM they call it a need for connection. When as children we are not heard, when we don't get the connection to our parents or our primary caregivers that we need, when we're not attuned to, it feels like there is something missing, and that's extremely painful. It feels like there's a hole in us, because back then we weren't able to communicate or understand that our needs aren't being adequately met. It's no fault of our own. It's not them that's broken. It's not our parents that can't give us what we need because we need them for survival. This is attachment theory stuff. So we turn the lens on ourselves. We say, well, I must be broken because somehow that feels like that's something we can resolve. So it's not them that's broken. It's not them that can't take care of us. It must be me. And that causes deep emotional, psychological, spiritual scars and wounds. I need some water. And that's what causes us to believe that we don't belong. We never belong. I always had this belief, this thought that I was never good enough. I was never enough. And it took me decades to begin to heal that wound. It's so deep-seated. It's so deep-rooted. And again, it comes from us not being heard, not being seen. And I've said that so much, seen, and it feels like that's just as important. Not being heard is just as important as not being seen, not being validated beautifully, perfectly for who we are or who we were. And then that takes us to number 5. If you have developed addictions, to numb the pain. Now, I did this through alcohol and porn. And it's interesting, The alcohol I'm happy to talk about, the porn not so much. There's a lot of shame around that. But both were used because I was so overwhelmed, because I was so stuck in my head, overthinking, overanalyzing everything. It became too much. I used both of those things to numb, to push down. Gabor Mate talks about this beautifully. I'll put a link if I find the video in the description below, where he talks about addictions as something that, you know, we feel shame around them. We obviously don't want them in our lives, but actually we need to reframe it. Addictions are born from us from an escapism. They helped us escape something that was so painful. We leaned into an addiction, whether that be alcohol, drugs, gambling, shopping, sex, porn, masturbation, whatever it might be. That was just our body's way, our nervous system's way of trying to find some kind of calm, some kind of escapism, some kind of equilibrium in a world that was just broken and chaotic and just too painful for us. So if you do have any of those addictions, and important to say I'm not an addiction specialist, but just look at it and almost thank it and say, thank you for protecting me. You've served me. You helped me get through something that was even more painful than the addiction. And then on to number 6 is talking too fast or over-explaining or even oversharing. Now, the over-explaining bit is really interesting to me because I know that I do that in my videos. I feel that I have to almost prove myself. I need to explain more so that you know that I know what I'm talking about. But obviously what that ends up doing is the opposite. It leads to confusion, and more often than not people just lose interest and switch off. But when we overshare, when we over communicate, when we talk too fast, again it's because we're trying to validate ourselves back to we weren't heard, we weren't listened to, we weren't seen as children. Those needs weren't met. We become adaptive, so we become over talkers. We talk too much, we share too much. It's almost a plea of please see me, please hear me. And it can also be a form of avoidance, again, when we look at the central nervous system, when it's in hyperarousal, when there's too much going on. Talking, thinking, overthinking can be a form of escape, because if we were to stop, if we were to pause, if we were to breathe and just slow down, then we're not left with thoughts anymore. We're left with feelings and emotions, and often they are really painful feelings and emotions that you've never allowed before, that you've never felt. But the healing, the beauty, the incredible work starts when we start to be curious about what's underneath, what we've suppressed for decades of our lives, what we've tried to ignore and run away from. And just as a beautiful bonus one, a true sign that we really weren't heard, that we really weren't listened to as children, is we get upset, we cry, we freeze when somebody truly listens to us, when somebody without agenda, without judgment, will just sit there and hear us. When you share something so raw, so tender, and that's just met with compassion and understanding. And in my line of work, more often than not, without words, I think I'm always reminded, I'm going to get this wrong, of the Simon and Garfunkel or Disturbed version of Sound of Silence, when they say people hear without speaking, listening. I can't remember which way around it is, but we have lost the art of truly hearing. So often than not, our people pleaser, when somebody shares something painful, often, I'm horrible, I'm useless, I'm crap, I'm broken, we feel the urge to reassure someone. And that does sound like it's a beautiful thing to do, doesn't it? But actually, the magic really shifts. The power is in the silence in between the pain. Because when you share something so vulnerable, so filled with shame and guilt, and that's just met with silence in a compassionate way, then it really allows the emotions and the pain to shift, and you'll notice that. That's why I've got such an issue with speaking therapy. It really doesn't work for developmental trauma stuff. It really doesn't work in this space. But if you do get emotional when somebody truly hears you, and then the shame shuts it down and you try and move on, then that's a surefire sign that you weren't heard, and you sure as shit weren't seen as a child. And if any of these, if all of them, if just one of them hit home, then I hope this has made you feel like you're not alone. You're definitely not broken. As I said at the start of the video, these aren't character flaws. This is developmental trauma. This is not your fault. And I hope this has helped understand, without too much over explaining, where this stuff comes from. Trust me when I say you're not broken, and you can download my free guide on that in the description below. If this has been useful, just another gentle invitation to watch this video next, which will help you break free, or start to break free, from the trauma cycles. Have a beautiful day. Big love, John.